The rain hit the windshield in furious bursts, blurring the sharp edges of Villardin's sleeping streets into gray smears. The siren shrieked through the cold like an animal in pain, echoing between rows of elegant stone facades and wrought iron balconies. Inside the ambulance, Amara N'Dour adjusted her gloves with mechanical precision, her breath slow and steady, but her fingers trembled beneath the latex. She didn't know why yet, but she would. Dispatch had offered no context. Disturbance. One injured. Police on scene. Standard language. Neat. Bloodless. But Amara had been doing this long enough to feel when something didn't sit right. There was a silence in the radio's voice, a caution in the tone that made her stomach tighten. Julian drove, tapping the steering wheel in rhythm with the siren. Relaxed. Chatting about nothing. A new show. A girl he was seeing. She nodded when necessary, eyes fixed on the screen detailing their route. Rue Pine. Affluent area. That meant clean stone, decorative trees, dogs walked in sweaters. It also meant white. Uniform. Watched. The ambulance turned the final corner, and the scene unfolded under the glow of yellow streetlights. 3 men stood at the edge of the sidewalk, their coats soaked, their stances casual. Off-duty officers, no mistake. One leaned against a lamppost, smoking. Another was wiping blood from his knuckles with a tissue, as if he'd spilled wine on himself. At their feet, crumpled like discarded clothing, lay a teenage boy. Amara opened the door before the wheels had fully stopped. She stepped into the rain, blinking as it sheeted across her face. The boy was barely moving. Blood seeped from a gash near his temple, pooling in the grooves of the stone. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He couldn't have been older than 15. Got himself hurt resisting, said the tallest officer, a smirk under his mustache. Tried to jack a car. Slipped. Amara didn't respond. She knelt beside the boy, pressing her fingers to his neck. His pulse stuttered beneath her touch. Weak. Rapid. He stirred, eyes fluttering open, and locked on hers. There was no misunderstanding the look. It wasn't pain. It wasn't confusion. It was terror. Raw, animal terror. And something more unbearable, recognition. As if he saw in her something he had waited for. A mirror. A final hope. "What's his name?" she asked. The officer shrugged. Didn't have ID. One of those silent types. Wouldn't say a word. Julian arrived beside her, crouching, unpacking the vitals monitor. Bleeding's bad. Skull may be cracked. We need to remove the cuffs, Amara said, already reaching for the key clip to her jacket. No need, said another officer sharply. He's restrained. Procedure. Amara looked at Julian. He didn't look back. We can't monitor neurological response if he's cuffed, she insisted. Julian gave a small, reluctant nod. Just do it fast. She unlocked the cuffs. The boy's wrists were raw, purpled. She noticed bruising on his ribs, a torn sleeve, one shoe missing. None of this was in the report. None of it ever would be. They lifted him onto the stretcher. As they loaded him into the ambulance, the boy's eyes never left hers. Rain fell harder, drumming on the roof. Inside, the hum of machinery rose. Julian inserted the 4. Amara cleaned the wound gently, hands steady now. But inside her, something was shattering. Slowly, quietly. Like ice cracking beneath pressure. As they sped toward the hospital, Julian began drafting the incident summary on his tablet. Amara glanced over. She saw the words forming. Subject found injured at scene. Officers report attempted vehicle theft. Subject non-responsive. No signs of excessive force observed. No signs. She turned to look at the boy. His eyes were closed now, lashes sticky with rain and blood. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. And in the hum of the sirens, Amara realized something she had tried not to know for most of her life. This wasn't a system that failed. It was a system that functioned exactly as it was built to. And she was inside it, helping it run. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and wet coats. Somewhere down the hall, a television murmured through grainy news. Amara pushed the stretcher through automatic doors that opened too slowly, like they resented her urgency. The boy's breathing was more labored now, rattling faintly in his chest. His blood soaked through the towel she had pressed to his scalp. No name. No parents. No voice. The trauma team converged, their practiced motions snapping into place. A nurse took over the compress. Another started calling out vitals. The boy was wheeled behind the heavy doors of the emergency ward, disappearing from view like something too inconvenient to keep in the open. No one asked her what she'd seen. She stood for a long time in the hallway, dripping rainwater onto the tile. Julian returned with 2 paper cups of machine coffee. "One for you," he said, holding it out. She didn't take it. He sipped. "Rough one." His wrists were torn, she said. Julian nodded, not looking at her. Probably struggled when they cuffed him. Kids panic. They make it worse. She turned to him, but the words wouldn't come. Not yet. They said he was trying to break into a car, he added. Drunk probably. Or on something. Amara stared at the floor, the coffee, anything but his eyes. Did he smell like alcohol to you? He shrugged. Didn't get close. Then maybe don't guess. Julian flinched, only slightly, but it was enough. Look, he said, voice lowering. It's not our job to dig into what happened before we got there. We treat. We leave. That's how it works. That's how we survive, she murmured. He paused, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? But she was already walking away. Later, in the staff lounge, the fluorescent lights buzzed above her as she logged into the incident report system. The cursor blinked at the top of the blank page. The box labeled Description of Scene seemed larger than it ever had before. She typed, then deleted. Typed again. She wrote about the boy's injuries. The positioning of the body. The blood. The cuffs. The officer's demeanor. Her notes were clinical, factual, stripped of judgment. She hesitated over one line. Subject displayed signs of head trauma inconsistent with accidental fall. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. Backspace. Gone. She stared at the empty space it left behind. Her chest felt tight, as if something unsaid had grown roots inside her. The door opened behind her. Her supervisor, Celine Marchand, entered, clipboard in hand. Celine was tall, blonde, crisp in a way that made even silence sound like protocol. Amara, she said. Quick word. They stepped into the hallway. There'll be an internal review, Celine said. Because police were involved. Standard. Your report will be included. Amara nodded. I need you to be precise, neutral. Stick to observable facts. No conjecture. I wasn't planning to lie, Amara said evenly. That's not what I said. Celine's smile was paper-thin. Just don't let emotion cloud your observations. We have to work with these people every day. You understand. Amara did understand. That was the problem. Back in the break room, she stared again at the report. The cursor blinked. 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 She thought of her father, standing in their old kitchen, wiping grease off his hands after a double shift, saying things like, never forget you'll always be 2 steps behind. And if you want to get ahead, stay quiet, work twice as hard, and never give them an excuse. She had followed that script for years, but now she could still feel the boy's eyes on hers. That silent, desperate question. She hit save, but the report was only half written. Neutral. Empty. Safe. Her hand trembled. She hadn't lied. Not yet. But she hadn't told the truth either. And that was a lie of its own. The walls of the inquiry office were the color of old ash, gray, dull, smothering. A single window let in a ribbon of light, but it was coated in grime, filtering the sun into something lifeless. Amara sat in a stiff chair across from 2 men in regulation suits, their badges barely visible under the folds of their blazers. Internal affairs investigators, brought in to clarify discrepancies. One of them, white, late 40s, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes, began. Miss N'Dour, thank you for coming in. Just a few clarifying questions about the night of January 14th. His partner, younger, darker-skinned, silent. His presence a calculated move. Amara saw through it immediately. Representation, not solidarity. We've reviewed your report, the first man continued. Appreciate the clinical detail. There are a few points we'd like to expand upon. He tapped a printed copy of her statement. You mentioned the subject's injuries were consistent with head trauma, but omit any hypothesis on the cause. Can you elaborate? She kept her voice flat. I'm not a forensic expert. I described what I saw. Right? But in your professional experience, would such injuries be consistent with, say, a simple fall while fleeing? I suppose they could be, if the fall involved a curb, a certain angle. But, he prompted. She met his gaze. But that's not what it looked like. He tilted his head. What did it look like then? She hesitated. The room seemed to narrow. His face looked like someone had been angry at it. Silence. The second man finally spoke. Do you believe excessive force was used by the officers on scene? Amara didn't answer right away. Her hands were folded on her lap, knuckles pale. I wasn't there when the injury happened. The first man scribbled something. Then your observations stop at physical symptoms. No assumptions, yes? Yes, she said. But her stomach turned. Because that wasn't true. Not entirely. The interview ended with polite nods, tight smiles, the illusion of fairness. When she stepped outside, the air hit her like a slap, cold and sudden. She stood on the hospital's rear terrace for a long moment, staring at the gray expanse of sky. It offered no answers. Inside, the hospital kept moving, unbothered. Lives were stitched together and broken apart behind sliding glass doors. People died here, people survived here. And still, the institution's heartbeat remained steady, indifferent. In the locker room, Amara sat on the bench, still in her uniform. Her phone buzzed. A message from Julian. They asked me the same crap. I just stuck to facts. Don't make this a thing. You okay? She didn't reply. She scrolled through local news. The incident had been buried deep, third-page material. Teen suspected of attempted theft hospitalized after fall. No mention of officers. No mention of force. Just a vague, faceless boy swallowed by passive language. She stared at the photo attached, a blurry night shot of flashing lights on wet pavement. And in the bottom corner, barely visible, a sneaker. The missing one. In the following days, the boy remained in a coma. No visitors came. No names matched the hospital intake. No one asked questions. It was as if the world had quietly agreed he didn't matter enough to be remembered properly. Her supervisor called her in again. Your cooperation is appreciated, Celine said, offering a plastic smile. They've concluded no foul play. We move on. Amara said nothing. Also, Celine continued, your tone in the interview was noted as tense. Just be careful. We're all walking tightropes here. That evening, in the hollow quiet of her apartment, Amara opened the report again. She read the words she had written, then deleted them, then rewrote them differently. Honestly, the bruises, the cuffs, the blood, the boy's eyes, the rage in his silence. She sat there, fingers trembling, then clicked Save as Draft. She couldn't submit it yet, but something had shifted. This wasn't survival anymore. This was a choice waiting in her throat. She dreamed of sirens. In her sleep, they weren't just sounds but voices, long, howling accusations that wrapped around her neck like a child's arms. In the dream, she was back in the ambulance, the boy's blood on her gloves. But when she looked down, it wasn't him on the stretcher. It was her father. She woke with a jolt, drenched in sweat, gasping. Morning light pressed through the curtains of her apartment like an unwanted visitor. The building groaned with old pipes and footsteps overhead. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, face in her hands, trying to quiet the noise in her head. She pulled a blanket tighter around herself. The radiator clicked. The old apartment smelled of bleach and burnt toast from a neighbor 2 floors up. On the wall opposite her bed hung a photo, her father, arms crossed, standing in front of the janitorial supply closet at his old job. He was proud in it, though his back ached even then. He had taught her to hold her shoulders straight and her mouth shut. You can't fight the river, he told her once. You learn to swim without splashing. Amara had believed that. She'd built her life on it. Every perfect report, every invisible deflection, every swallowed protest. But now, the river had swallowed a child. At the hospital, Things moved on as if nothing had happened. The boy remained in a coma, his room tucked behind a curtain at the end of the pediatric wing. No name, just a number on the chart, 2037 Delta. She visited him between shifts. Not every day, but often enough that the nurses stopped asking why. She sat in the corner chair, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, the bandages, the machines that breathed for him. He looked smaller in the silence. Less like a case, more like a boy. A boy someone had decided didn't need to wake up. She thought of all the names the world might give him: criminal, thug, mistake, and none of them felt as heavy as the truth. He was a child. One night, Julian found her sitting by the boy's bed. "You okay?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. He shifted, uncomfortable. "You're taking this hard." She looked at him. "Why aren't you?" He shrugged. "It's tragic, yeah, but it's not our job to fix what's broken outside the ambulance. We just treat what we find. You wrote in your report that you saw no signs of excessive force." He hesitated. "I didn't. Not that I could prove. Look, I get it. You want to believe there's more we could have done. But it's over." "No," she said quietly. "It's not." He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck. "Be careful, Amara. You start pointing fingers at cops, they'll close ranks. We're not immune." She stood. "Then let them close ranks. Let them choke on each other's silence." He looked startled, maybe even a little afraid. She left without another word. That night, she reopened the draft report. The one that told the truth. She edited nothing. This time, she clicked Submit. The screen froze for a second, then confirmed, report filed. And just like that, the world stayed quiet. No alarms. No response. No validation. The next morning, her locker had been opened. Everything inside dumped on the floor. Her stethoscope snapped in half. A note had been left, scrawled on the back of a prescription form. Rats shouldn't bite the hand that feeds. She picked it up slowly, folding it once, then again. No anger rose in her chest. Only something deeper, darker. A certainty. She was no longer protected by silence. She had stepped into the open. The cold wind she felt now, it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was the chill of being seen, being marked. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to hide again. The hallway outside her flat was quiet that morning, unnervingly so. No neighbor's dog barking. No arguments behind thin walls. Just stillness. Amara locked her door with deliberate care and descended the stairwell with her badge already clipped to her coat. At the hospital, things were colder. She noticed it first in the glances, colleagues looking through her, not at her. Conversation stopped when she entered rooms. Julian no longer waited at the ambulance bay. They rode separate shifts now. When she passed her supervisor's office, the door closed with the soft, unmistakable finality of disapproval. She had become a shadow in her own workplace. The report had gone to the Internal Incident Committee and, by extension, to the Police Oversight Board. She'd heard nothing since filing it. But silence, she learned, had its own acoustics. It echoed in the distance others put between themselves and her. In the careful way doctors avoided asking for her input. In the absence of her name on the next month's duty roster. Still, she kept showing up. She returned to room 2037 Delta whenever she could. The boy's condition hadn't changed. Tubes still snaked from his arms, machines still monitored his shallow breaths. But now his name was known. His mother had come. The woman arrived in silence, wearing an oversized coat and eyes so dry they seemed incapable of crying. She was small, older than Amara expected. She didn't speak much. She just sat at her son's side, holding his hand, whispering fragments of Wolof and French, a thread of memory binding him to the world. One afternoon, as Amara brought fresh linens, the woman looked up. "You're the one who stayed." Amara paused. "I didn't do enough." The woman smiled. It was sad, but not bitter. "You're the only one who didn't lie." A week later, the hospital called Amara in for a formal disciplinary hearing. She was ushered into a conference room where Celine, 2 HR representatives, and a hospital board liaison waited with folded hands and neutral expressions. Celine began, her voice dipped in forced politeness. Your recent incident report contained language and assessments that, while emotionally understandable, exceed the limits of your professional purview. Which language? Amara asked. Statements implying misconduct without definitive proof. Words like inconsistent, aggressive posture, bruising not aligned with stated cause. These aren't medical conclusions. They read as accusations. Amara didn't blink. They're descriptions of what I observed. The HR representative cleared her throat. Amara, no one is saying you were dishonest. But these remarks jeopardize our working relationship with law enforcement. Our working relationship, Amara repeated. What about the child in a coma? The liaison stepped in. The officers in question have been cleared of wrongdoing after an internal review. Their accounts were found consistent. Consistent with each other, Amara said. Not with the body I treated. A beat of silence followed. You're being placed on administrative leave, Celine said, folding the file shut. Pending further evaluation. Amara stood. Of course. As she left the building, something strange happened. She didn't feel fear. She didn't feel anger. She felt clean. The next day, a quiet knock came at her apartment door. When she opened it, a teenage girl stood there, small and sharp-eyed. The boy's sister. Behind her, their mother waited on the stairwell. The girl held out a folded paper. It was a hand-drawn thank you card. Inside was only one sentence, written in careful block letters. You didn't let them disappear him. Amara knelt, accepting it as gently as one might hold a fragile truth. They didn't stay. They didn't need to. The gesture was enough. She placed the card on her table, beside her father's photograph. She knew what came next would be worse. She had broken the code. She had chosen the voice over the silence. And now, the city would choose what to do with her. The hearing room wasn't built for truth. It was designed for order, rectangular, clinical, with pale walls that swallowed sound and a ceiling too low for breath. Amara sat alone at the center table, fingers folded in her lap, a single microphone angled toward her mouth like an interrogation lamp. Across from her sat the police disciplinary board, 3 men and 1 woman. Badges polished. Faces neutral. To their left, the defense team. 3 lawyers. 2 of the officers involved were present. Clean-shaven, suits tailored, expressions carefully constructed from years of courtroom etiquette. They looked bored. Or worse, confident. On her right, no one. No representative from the hospital. No union rep. No Julian. Just Amara and a silent folder of evidence in her lap. The chairwoman of the board cleared her throat. Miss N'Dour, you may begin your statement. Amara leaned toward the mic. Her voice came out soft at first, but steady. I was dispatched to Rue Dia Pine on January 14th at 22:47 hours. Upon arrival, I found an unconscious male, approximately 15 years old, with visible head trauma, wrist lacerations from metal restraints, and signs of blunt force to the torso. 3 off-duty officers were on scene. She paused. The scene, the positioning of the body, the demeanor of the officers, none of it matched their account of a simple fall. The lead officer's attorney raised a hand. Objection. Speculation. The chairwoman looked at Amara. Please refrain from character judgments. She nodded. Noted. They questioned her for over an hour. They dissected her words. Her phrasing. Why had she used the term aggressive posture? Why had she not taken photos? Had she perhaps interpreted too much through her personal lens? Was she aware her perception could be influenced by cultural bias? Cultural bias. That phrase sat in the room like a poisonous fog. They brought up her disciplinary leave, implying emotional instability. Her insistence on revising the report was framed as erratic. They questioned her professionalism, her detachment, her tone. But Amara didn't falter. She answered every question, not as an accuser, but as a witness. Not to what she assumed, but to what she saw, what she touched, what she could not unsee. The turning point came not from the lawyers or the board, but from a voice at the back of the room. A young girl stood, awkward, trembling. The boy's sister. She had slipped in unnoticed, sitting among the sparse audience. Her mother followed her up the aisle, trying to stop her, but the girl stepped forward. He said one word before the machines took over, she said. He said, helped. Silence. Amara turned toward her. He said, one of them helped. I didn't understand. But now I do. He meant you. Security began moving. The board exchanged glances. But the girl wasn't finished. They didn't just beat him. They left him there. Like garbage. If she hadn't come, he would have died. You ask her about her tone? Ask them about their fists. The mother gently pulled her back, whispering in her ear. They left the room before the guards could catch up. No one spoke for a long moment. The hearing resumed. Statements were concluded. The board promised to deliberate. Amara left through the side exit, past reporters who didn't call her name, past hospital staff who wouldn't meet her eye. She walked home in silence, the words cultural bias still lodged in her chest like a bone. The girl's voice had shaken something loose inside her, a wall she hadn't realized was still standing. A part of her had believed that telling the truth, with enough precision, would make the system bend. But systems weren't built to bend. They were built to protect themselves. She paused before her building, watching dusk fold over Villarden like a shroud. Then she walked the long way around, past the hospital, past Rue de Pine, past the spot where a child's blood had soaked into old stone. She didn't cry. But inside her, something cracked. And through that crack, a new thing began to grow. The verdict arrived 2 weeks later. It came not in a courtroom but through headlines, each one colder than the last. No charges for officers in teen incident. Fall deemed accidental. Oversight board finds no evidence of excessive force. Medical technician reprimanded for procedural breach. Amara didn't read beyond the titles. She didn't need to. Truth had once again been paved over with protocol. The boy, his name now known as Mamadou Diallo, remained in recovery. Still nonverbal. His mother kept vigil at his bedside, as if her presence could coax him back to the surface. No lawsuit was filed. The family had been advised it was futile. The city's lawyers were already armed, shields raised behind bureaucracy. Amara received her official notice the same day, indefinite suspension for insubordination and breach of neutrality. Typed in clean font. Signed without hesitation. The letter offered an appeal process. She didn't bother. Her locker had already been emptied for her. Her nameplate was gone. She walked out of the hospital without ceremony. No one said goodbye. The automatic doors slid shut behind her with the soft finality of exile. For a moment, she stood on the curb, blinking in the late afternoon light. Then she walked. Not toward home. Toward the place she hadn't let herself go since her father died, the abandoned community hall in the Quartier Nord, where local activists met in the hushed corners of forgotten city blocks. Graffiti stained its bricks. But inside, voices were beginning to rise again. She pushed the door open. A few heads turned. A man at the front nodded at her, his expression unreadable. "You're Amara N'Dour," he said. Not a question. She nodded. "We've read your statement," he said. "We'd like to hear the parts that didn't make the papers." For the first time in weeks, her shoulders dropped, just slightly. The room wasn't warm. The chairs were uncomfortable. The posters were faded. But the silence here felt different. Not avoidance. Invitation. She began to speak. At first, haltingly. Then stronger. She told them about the night on Rue de Pine. The boy's blood. The officers' faces. The pressure to stay quiet. The hospital's chill. Her own complicity before the break. They listened. No interruptions. No corrections. When she finished, no applause followed. Only nods. A passing of weight. In the weeks that followed, she joined the group. Not as a figurehead. Not as a hero. Just another pair of hands helping to print flyers, organize vigils, write statements. She found herself speaking at local schools. Sitting in on legal clinics. Visiting Mamadou's mother. Quiet work. Steady work. The world did not change. Not yet. But Amara did. She no longer checked over her shoulder. She no longer waited for validation. Her voice, once a careful tool of survival, had become something else entirely, a weapon. A month later, she stood outside the police precinct, candle in hand, surrounded by silent protesters. Not shouting. Just standing. A line of officers watched from behind barricades. One of them was among the 3 from that night. He recognized her. Looked away. She didn't. She met his eyes and held them until he dropped his gaze. She lit her candle. Its flame flickered in the wind, but did not go out. Later that night, Mamadou opened his eyes. Spring in Villarden came like an apology, soft, hesitant, uncertain of its welcome. The air was warmer now, but the city remained gray around the edges, like a painting left too long in the rain. Amara walked the narrow streets of Quartier Nord, the soles of her boots pressing into the cracks of uneven pavement, past shuttered storefronts and children chasing each other between parked cars. She carried a small bag of books, coloring pencils, and a plush lion. Room 14 of the rehabilitation center was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the faint scratch of pen on paper. Mamadou was awake. Not always lucid, but awake. He sat propped against pillows, his hair grown in patches, eyes still too large for his face. When Amara entered, he looked up. Recognition flickered, not just memory, but a slow, careful trust. She offered a smile. "May I sit?" He nodded. She placed the bag on the table and unpacked the contents slowly, letting him see each item. He reached for the lion first, held it tight. His fingers moved carefully now, learning again. "I brought you something else," she said. From her coat pocket, she withdrew a small laminated card. It was his name, his real one, written in bold, even letters, Mamadou Chaik Diallo. "I thought you should have it." He took it, running his thumb over the plastic. Then he pointed to her. "You helped." It wasn't a question, not even a full sentence, but it was enough. She nodded, eyes stinging. Outside, the wind stirred blossoms from a half-dead tree. The city hadn't changed, not in the ways that counted. The officers still wore their uniforms. The headlines had long moved on. But something had shifted underground, in the quiet corners of rooms like this. A pulse. A name remembered. A silence broken. Amara spent her days now moving between spaces, community centers, schools, legal aid desks, court hearings. She wasn't trying to change the world. She was trying to stop it from swallowing more children. She had given up the uniform, but not the work. Her voice was no longer something she guarded. It was something she gave. Sometimes she stood in front of rooms and told the story of a boy who nearly disappeared, and of a woman who didn't let him. She never gave the boy's full name. She let him tell that story himself. And he did. Slowly. Word by word. One afternoon, months later, Mamadou drew a picture with charcoal pencils Amara had brought. It was crude, full of thick lines and shadowed shapes. But in the center, unmistakably, was a figure standing between 2 others. He handed it to her. "Is that me?" she asked softly. He nodded. "You're standing in the rain," he said. She looked closer. The figure's coat was dark. The sky was streaked. But her face was clear. And above it, a single word was written in uneven block letters. Light. She folded the drawing and placed it in her notebook. Outside, the city carried on. Still bruised. Still blind in places. But now, somewhere in its gray sprawl, a boy with a lion toy and a woman with steady hands were building something the city couldn't undo. Not justice, but truth. And sometimes that was the first crack in the wall. Rain began to fall again as she stepped outside. This time, she didn't run. She lifted her face to the sky and let it wash her clean.